A pleasant day to the participants and organizers of the International Virtual TESOL Conference 2020. We are greeting you from sunny Manila, the Philippines, hoping that you and your family are healthy and safe amidst the pandemic. We are student researchers from one of the top universities in the 2019 QS Asia University Rankings of Philippine Higher Educational Institutions, the Mapua University. We are freshman psychology majors from the School of Social Sciences and Education of this university, and we have Dr. Edward J.M. Quinto as our mentor for this project. I am Kyla Javita A. Surtida.
My name is Mark Benjamin L. Revaula.
And I am Steven Shu.
Today, we will be sharing with you the results of our research from our Gender and Society late last year. The research is titled Comparison of the Features of Mixed Gender Friends Conversations in Face-to-Face and Online Modes. We thank you in advance for coming to our virtual research presentation today. Let us start with the background of the study.
Recently, there has been a growing interest in the conversations between genders and how one is dominant than the other. Hasal, coaches, and all have found that in some contexts, males are more aggressive in converging with different sexes, while females carry out the conversation more. Moreover, it is known that in a relationship, whether it is classified as romantic or friendly relationship, power imbalance exists. This is because one party does not want to be handled and just always be differential than the other. This situation is backed up by different studies, showing that conflict emerges when people disagree to the idea of another. Bei Cheng stated that the idea of made by the people in a relationship is purely based on his or her perspective rather than being equally balanced. This led to problems that resort to physical and emotional abuse. In addition, in an article of Davis and Williamson, they found out that women's individualism significantly affects her decision, hence leading to dispute with her partner. The style of communication of each gender contributes on how they deliver in a conversation. That women's communicative styles are often equated with powerlessness, while men's communicative styles are often associated with professionalism and power. There are specific styles in each gender that affects their way of communicating, integrating, and compromising. In terms of status, whether it is friendship or in intimate relationship, different genders have part of their personality that has an impact on their communication dominance. Furthermore, they suggested that language has a multiplier effect on the effectiveness of prospection. That is, that many minds are better than one. Also, they have these notes that the prospection can involve only the essential features of a future event. Likewise, when using different languages, on both genders and both relational and friendship conversation can be dearly affect the means of communication because it is more relevant to use language on a certain event that clearly uses the kind of basis with the help of oral communication. In addition, people communicate to each other to maintain social relationships. Behavioral interactions within a certain relationship require significant amount of energy to tell how close a relationship is. Conversations typically grow and contain more speakers. The size of the conversation restrict the colloquial manner, referring to the difficulty of maintaining casual and free-form conversations. According to Tannen, communication is a continual balancing act, juggling the conflicting needs for intimacy and independence. Since nobody is raised the same way, masculine and feminine styles of discourse are understood as distinct cultural dialects. Tannen separates from feminist scholarship by insisting that there is a large gender difference in the way of we speak. In another research paper, it was stated that friendly conversation gives a great impact to influence dating. This research aims to determine the dominant gender in an adolescent-friendly conversation. Many researchers tend to determine whether which gender really dominates a conversational setting between same-sex and opposite sexes. Researchers have been studying about the different settings. different conversation features, and language cues that could help answer the question of which gender is more dominant and aggressive. Researchers have tried using different tests and observations of different communicative styles, which proves that males could be more dominant and aggressive in face to face conversations. This paper aims to compare the different features of mixed gender friends conversations in face to face and online modes. This paper aims to utilize the theoretical framework used by DITA, which focuses on conversational features. This study aims to answer the following questions. What were the overall features used in mixed gender friendly conversations of Filipino participants? How do the features differ according to the type of mixed gender conversation? And lastly, how does the use of the features in mixed gender friendly conversations differ in face to face conversations and online modes? In this framework, we can see the five features of friendly conversations, which are changing of topic, listening and attentiveness, self disclosure, agreement and dissent, and term of endearment. And if these features are affected by type of mixed gender and mode of conversation.
This section contains the methods used, the participants involved, procedures used by the researchers, and data gathering instruments. The research design. Qualitative research design was used in this study to verify the results to examine the recorded conversation. The collected data would help researchers compare the conversational features between mixed genders conversation through face-to-face and online modes of conversation. Research participants. The researchers gathered data from 20 participants with different backgrounds and consist of different genders, different age groups, and different levels of closeness. The participants are all students from different universities, and they differ in grade levels. Almost all participants shared the same sentiments about school or discloseness about school's work. The researchers were able to collect data from people they have close connections around, best friends by having a normal conversation and not initiating a specific topic. In this way, it is easier to determine the dominance among the participants in a normal conversation. The researchers collected data in a way that their chosen participants do not have idea that their conversations are being recorded. Therefore, there are no consent given to any participants. Research settings. The researchers conduct the study within the vicinity of Manila by recording face-to-face conversation and online modes of conversation, regardless of the gender. The researchers gathered the data within the following locations: friend's house, mall, and school. These conversations took place in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Data gathering instruments. The data gathering instruments used by data as a reference for conversational features and framework. In addition, frequency tables were used by researchers to identify which feature governs in every scene or transcript. Participants of the study. The main respondents of the study primarily focused on the students who had conversation through friends face-to-face and online modes conversation. Regardless of their gender, after recording the data, researchers filtered the transcript data by identifying how their conversation aligned with the researcher's feature. The procedural analysis. This analysis has four phases. The first phase is identifying the differences in friends face-to-face and online of conversation. Defining the differences in the friends face-to-face and online mode of conversation. By researching and reading upon books, as well as reading previous researches, theses, and articles that had been conducted and published, with this being established as the first phase of the objectives. This now becomes a backbone of the study since it gives the researchers a step-by-step guide on how to identify differences in face-to-face and online mode of conversation, which will help find solutions for the main objectives and other problems of the research. By following these two steps, first, researching relevant information about the differences in friends face-to-face and online mode of conversation through online thesis, articles, and etc. And this will be followed by the next step, where the researchers would then analyze the data that had been gathered and identify whether the data is relevant to the topic. With the steps being established, it can now help identify the differences in friends face-to-face and online mode of conversation. The step one, again, is read related literatures about the face-to-face and online mode of conversations. Second step is analyze and investigate the gathered data about the face-to-face and online mode of conversation. The second phase, analyzing gender differences between face-to-face and online modes of conversation. Analyzing gender differences between face-to-face and online messaging through researching from articles and studies related to the scope of the topic. This first step will give an idea for possible outcome of how gender is a factor in these two types of conversational settings. The researchers will then conduct data gathering by recording actual conversation and online messaging involving male to female to female, gay to female, and male to bisexual, gender fluid females. The effectivity of this study will determined by a table that will indicate the frequency of conversational features through face-to-face and online modes of conversation, considering different gender participants. Phase 3. Analyzing whether face-to-face and online modes of conversation affects conversational features. Analyzing transcript of data and frequency table of whether conversational feature is affected by face-to-face and online modes of conversations. The frequency table will help the researchers to identify and compare conversational feature that can be present in face-to-face and online conversations. To conduct this phase, there are three steps needed. First, the researchers gathered the data by recording and transcribing voice records and online conversations. Then, researchers record how frequent the conversational features occurs in face-to-face conversation and online mode of conversation. Lastly, researchers compare different conversational settings between face-to-face conversations and online mode of conversations. Given these steps, the researchers should be able to compare the different settings within face-to-face and online mode of conversations. Phase 4. determining whether gender has a role in this conversational feature. Researchers will analyze the transcript of data and frequency table to determine the type of conversation, whether when they are using the conversational features. Comparing the different genders using the different type of conversational features to know if there is a difference on how participants communicate within a conversational, and finally determine how gender roles affect the communication. Looking at the frequency table and the transcripts of data, researchers can already determine on how mixed gender contribute to friends conversation.
Now for the results. Question number 1 is what were the overall features used in mixed gender friendly conversations of Filipino participants? So, an analysis of different conversations revealed that mixed gender conversation revolves around 5 different features, namely changing the topic, self disclosure, listening and attentiveness, agreement versus dissent, and terms of endearment. So as you can see, self-disclosure was used frequently in face-to-face. So if we will analyze the table, the dominant gender in changing the topic is the males, in self-disclosure is the females, in listening and attentiveness there were no dominant genders, in agreement and dissent the males were also dominant, and in terms of endearment, females were dominant. So for question number 2, how do the features differ according to the type of mixed gender conversation? So there was an analysis of different conversations showed that mixed gender conversations rely only on 4 different conversational features, which are changing the topic, self-disclosure, terms of endearment, and agreement versus dissent. So constantly changing the topic was used in online mode of conversation because it was easier to shift a topic in an online mode of conversation. So for question number 3, how does the use of the features in mixed gender friendly conversations differ in face-to-face conversations and online modes? So the researchers found that by using the features in mixed gender conversations, they were able to identify that in the face-to-face conversations have more self-disclosure features because it is in a personal setting and that it would be easier to open up since they could be comforted. And the researchers found that in online mode of conversation, the dominating feature is the changing of the topic since it would be easier to hide one's intentions to a topic and that there is no confrontation happening in the conversation. Lastly, the face-to-face is the dominating mode of conversation as shown in Table 2. So for the discussion, an analysis of different conversations revealed that mixed gender conversations revolves around 5 different features, namely changing the topic, self-disclosure, listening and attentiveness, agreement versus dissent, and term of endearment. In face-to-face conversations, self-disclosure was used frequently. Another observation is that listening and attentiveness comes only when a participant is interested in the conversation. The researchers found that by using these features in a mixed gender conversation, they were able to identify that there are more self-disclosure features in a face-to-face conversation than in an online mode conversation.
Conclusion. The researchers found that there are 5 commonly used features in a mixed gender friend conversation, which are self-disclosure, changing the topic, term of endearment, agreement and dissent, and listening and attentiveness. These features are mentioned according to the numbers of times used in a conversation. There were 5 different mixed gender conversations that were observed by the researchers, and the results of each feature varied. Each feature differed depending on the genders involved in the conversation. Men dominate the changing the topic conversational feature, while women tend to self-disclose more. Lastly, the modes also varied results depending on the features used in the conversation. It was shown that it is easier for both ends of the conversation to change the topic than in face to face. Another is that self-disclosing is used more in a face to face conversation than in online modes. Recommendations. The researchers of this study would recommend the following to the future researchers who would like to expand or elaborate this study. First, to gather more data in online modes of messaging and to analyze and observe data which uses different modes of conversation rather than face-to-face and online modes. Second, to try and observe whether the age of the genders being observed has a direct effect on the conversational features given. And lastly, to observe and compare more conversational features which are not stated in this study nor in the previous studies.